Here on the Tim Cook resignation and moving on. This guy, John Turnus, is a 25-year vet. He did lots of hardware, worked on iPad, AirPods, and he was the favorite on Polymarket since day one. He's a bold decision maker, according to reports. And unlike Tim Cook did a great job of squeezing every last nickel out of Steve Jobs' product line, which lasted for a decade, iPhone, Apple TV, watch. I don't need to repeat them. But here we are. We got a product person in the seat, which is what we all know they needed because, hey, these tools are getting a little bit stale. Siri, disgraziad, AirPods, disgraziad. The whole system is not built on innovation anymore. It's built, Freeberg, I think you would agree, on just wringing more profits. What's your hope here? Because, man, they missed so many great swings at bat. They didn't get the Oculus, Ray-Bans that Meta did. They canceled their self-driving car. What would you hope that this new CEO of Apple focuses on, Freeberg, in terms of innovation? They don't have a problem selling phones still. They don't have a problem selling laptops and making a ton of money. But if you were in the seat, if you were on the board of Apple, which wouldn't be a bad idea for them, if I'm being honest, what would you tell the new CEO to focus on, David Freeberg?
I mean, I don't know. The software layer of the future is not the software layer of the past. So it's pretty obvious. I don't know how much there is to talk about, but you just need the Siri equivalent that's ubiquitous in all of your devices, knows who you are, personalized to you, sees your email, sees your calendar entries, knows what kind of music you like, has connection to your home. Basically build that AI layer for your life and make it ubiquitous in all of your Apple devices, that no matter what device you're using, it knows who you are. You can engage with it using kind of a natural language method. And it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. They should buy WhisperFlow. Yeah. I mean, that would be...
I don't know how they're running the business, but...
Well, they're running it for profits, obviously, Sachs. I would say buy WhisperFlow and just replace the Siri team with that, because Siri's been just... The fact that Siri can't spell polyhopatia or calicanis after 20 years of us giving them $20,000 for iPhones is just disgraceful. Sachs, if you were on the board of Apple, again, not a bad idea, what would be your hope for the company? What would be your sage advice for the new CEO?
Well, I mean, everybody is going to be asking the same question, which is, what are you going to do about AI? I don't know that they needed to be on the bleeding edge of it, but they are going to need an answer at some point, and Siri is going to need to be AI empowered. Probably the way it should work is that you get to choose your model. I mean, I don't know that they need to pick just one model provider. It could be a setting where you go in and you set up your account with whatever, ChatGPT or Grok or Claude or what have you, and you can choose your own model provider, and then you'll have more customization and more ability to control your storage. Let me just say, just on Tim Cook's retirement, he had an incredible run as CEO of Apple. I mean, he ran it very effectively for 15 years. The market cap of the company went up by over 10x. The revenue grew from roughly $100 billion a year to over $400 billion a year. He also improved the quality of revenue by moving the mix into services, which is partly why I got a higher valuation. And, people say that, well, they never did any innovation under Tim Cook. But, I've seen people tweet lists of products that were released under him, and there were a lot of them. Now, it's true, nothing as big as the iPhone, but they did release a lot of products under Tim Cook. And then just finally, I mean, you look back over the last 15 years, and there really weren't any public snafus or scandals or imbroglios with Apple. It's one of the few tech brands that is still, I think, beloved by the population. I think a major part of that was Tim Cook's dedication to privacy and keeping the company on the right side of that, which I think users do appreciate. And, Tim Cook even got praise from the president. I think it was just unsolicited, where the president talked about how Tim Cook didn't call him up that often, but when he did, it was something important, and therefore the president tried to help them out. It seems like he nurtured a good relationship with the president over the last decade or so. So you just have to say that he navigated what could have been a turbulent period with a great deal of grace and aplomb.
Clearly, Chamath, he was a great steward of the brand, even though that list of products were all developed under Steve Jobs and they were just executed well, but he didn't bring in a lot of new products or services. Any final take?
But actually, Jake, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
what do you think, other than AI, AI powered Siri, let's say. What do you think he missed? I mean,
clearly
what should Apple have done that they didn't do?
They would have out by now a pair of glasses that weren't 17 pounds like the Apple Vision Pro. They would have gotten glasses that pair perfectly with your phone, take videos for kids, and they're coming out with it. It's just on a really broken timeline. They would have had a killer Siri. They would have had a search engine-ish Perplexity-like product. They would have had a self-driving car. When you went to the Apple store, you would have been buying 2 or 3 very important products: glasses, a car, and probably a television set. If you look at actually what they did innovative under Tim Cook, I think that they have great taste, and Apple TV produced a lot of great programming. He was working on a television set, not Apple TV clunked onto the back. I think those 3 products would have been 4 products: Siri, glasses, car, television set. Those would have been extraordinary. And who knows what he would have come up with. When they lost Johnny Ive, and obviously Steve Jobs passed away, they lost the soul of the company. They lost the innovative, groundbreaking soul of the company, and they just went into profit and iteration mode. But no acquisitions of note, nothing important was acquired, and nothing important was released. Vision Pro, you can give them maybe that's like the 6th best product or something, but it obviously hasn't hit the mainstream. Chamath, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I have 3 specific things to say. The first is that he had, honestly, an impossible job. It's sort of like you play basketball with Michael Jordan, and then you're asked to be Michael Jordan. And I think that that's an impossible task. And on that dimension, I think he has done just an incredible job. He has been an incredible steward of the business. Sachs is right. No major snafus. I think he did a really smart thing around doubling down on privacy. And just as a practical matter of being a great CEO, I think you can categorize CEOs in 2 buckets. One is the innovator, the person that's pushing the envelope. And then the second is just a great steward. He's at the top of that second category. I sent you a couple of charts to show this. And he found a lane that allowed him to separate himself from Steve Jobs. So, as an example, what does it mean to be a steward? Well, when you're a steward, you're allocating resources, and the 2 most important resources you control is capital and people. And I think on that dimension, what Tim did, if you just look at this, is he was able to invest appropriately in R&D. They completely divested their need of Intel. They spun their entire new line of silicon. That silicon, it turns out, and this will be important in the future, is very useful in AI with all of this OpenClaw stuff. And, some of you guys are completely addicted to it. And they've kept the acquisitions light. So he was very capital efficient. If you look at the next chart, what's so interesting is it is the exact opposite of what Steve Jobs did. Look at the amount of money that Steve Jobs returned to shareholders in his tenure at Apple. It's easy to count. It was 0. He loved to keep that money on the balance sheet, and he probably, or maybe, I'm guessing, would have directed that at some huge shot on goal. In the Tim Cook era, it was very different. He shrank the share count by almost 50%. I think it's 44%. So
that's insane. Is there any corollary to that, Chamath?
No, he's been a prolific shareholder-friendly CEO, finding ways to give us money back, which I think everyone who's owned the stock has very deeply appreciated. The last thing I'll say, though, is what is the future for John Turnus? And I think it's in this final chart. We talked about the problematic nature of increasing per unit pricing in SaaS. And what I would say is if you look at the iPhone, the unit price has gone up. And people would say, yes, but the capabilities have gone up in turn. And I acknowledge that. But the problem with the per unit pricing being as high as it is what Freeberg says is going to happen. AI rips open the canvas of the devices that we will use to interact with information and knowledge. We are going to live in a much more heterogeneous world in the future. It's not going to be 2 devices and 2 different operating systems that get you to knowledge. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. Pens, orbs, who knows, Jason, your glasses, whatever. And so the problem is if you get too addicted to a single thing that has an incredibly juicy profit margin and great stickiness, and the ability to raise price, it's a hard drug to get off of. So I think really what John Turnus has to do is figure out how to move to this world where everybody will be launching umpteen devices via MCP or otherwise. All of these services will be open. It'll be agentically talking to everything. I think the moats decay. And I think if that happens, that's problematic if you're too reliant on a single thing to kind of keep it going.
Yeah, and just expanding on what you said, like wearables is where they really made some good inroads in terms of getting people to use them, whether it's AirPods or the watch. And the next wearable, like this is a Plod pin that I use to record. You can put it here, put it on your wrist. That AI synchronicity of having your eyes, having your ears, having your watch, having your phone, your desktop, all synced together with AI could be a huge product line. I'll also add a fifth, robotics. I think Steve Jobs, if he were alive today, would have been looking at Roomba. He would have been looking at Optimus, and he would have said, consumer robotics in addition to a consumer car. Those are two things I think he would have absolutely executed on at a high level. Okay, let's keep moving here.
Just can I make one last point?
And we'd love to have you on the pod, John. So just come on the pod when you're ready. We'll have you come sit in. Go ahead, Sachs, you get the final word.
Just one last point on this is that I think the succession at Apple is reminiscent a little bit of the succession at Disney. And apparently, Steve Jobs and Tim Cook had this conversation back when Steve was alive. And Steve told Tim, don't do what Disney did, where basically after Walt Disney died, the company kind of languished because it felt so beholden to Walt's vision that they never really iterated. Now, when Walt died, his brother Roy took over, and Roy was already in the business. He was sort of like the business co-founder. He was a COO type, a little bit like Tim Cook, and he kept the magic going for about 5 years, and then he himself died. I think it was around 1971. And then you had this string of CEOs who took over kind of uninspired. And it wasn't until Eisner came in 1984 that he sort of revitalized the business. And so, as I understand it, Steve and Tim had this conversation. And Steve told him, don't be too beholden to my vision. You need to figure out your own and extend it. I think that, you could argue that Tim, in a way, was like the Roy figure here, very effective business partner of Steve. He got a 15-year run. Roy only got 5. And I think, again, he added a 0 to the value of the company.
Crazy.
The market cap went up over 10x. So you'd have to say fantastically successful run as CEO. I think the question now for John Turnus is, okay, you're now past, let's say, the Walt Disney and Roy Disney part of the business. Is it going to be like the 1970s Disney, or is it going to be more like the 1980s? Do you figure out a way to revitalize it, or do you have to go through kind of a funk first?
Yeah, and I think it's like really illustrative of this discussion, Eisner and Iger, because Eisner's innovation was he realized that Disney was, I think he called it the vault strategy. He would, and we probably remember this from our childhoods, he would re-release all into theaters, all of their IP every 7 years. You couldn't get some of those Bambis, whatever, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. You couldn't get those products except in theaters. And he figured out a cadence to keep publishing. But then Iger came in and said, hey, what if we use this balance sheet and we use this distribution at the parks and with their brand to buy Pixar, Marvel, and Star Wars. And so there's multiple ways to do it. There might be something there in terms of acquisitions, bold acquisitions with the Apple balance sheet could be super accretive to shareholders as opposed to lowering the share count and just distributing a ton of cash. All right, listen, we're going to talk about the Southern Poverty Law Center.
Racism corner. Let's go to fake racism corner. I want to know how the SPLC